So, welcome back to the CNU Survivor Aftershow. I'm joined with Samir, and from season 2 on Mystery Gang, we have Lily, which I'm super excited to have you. And I can't wait to discuss tonight's episode. We had a huge tribe swap, and we had a crazy challenge, and we had people having conversations everywhere, and I can't wait to get to talk about this episode with you guys. So
'twas a whirlwind.
For sure. So after last tribal with John going home, it seemed like it was quite a huge surprise, a huge blindside after last episode. So what were kind of the thoughts?
Watching my reaction again, like I now remember how torn up I was, but like in hindsight, I was like, I guess in the moment, one, that was my first tribal. So that experience, you never forget your first. It was just kind of, I think, because for like compared to the first elimination of the season with Sam, like that felt one, it's as hard as the first elimination of the season is, like all they really had to base it off of was the challenge. So it didn't feel too personal. It doesn't feel great. But now I think we were coming off of we won 2 games, and that was a streak for us, because we were starting to feel really strong. And I think what it did come down to, at least as we started it, I have a little drinking game with myself of anytime even Colin Ray even quoted me, not sarcastically, my dad, he like honestly quoted me like what I was saying was good advice about cross that bridge when we get there. And even I annoyed myself a little bit when I heard myself say that so many times. I was like, oh, I was really insistent about that. But to an extent, I think it worked until we got to the point where we had to talk. And I think by that point, I was like, okay, I can't push this off anymore. But that people that didn't do that, like Abby and John, both of them had an instance where they came off of a challenge that we didn't need to have infighting, and that just is an automatic kind of flag. You're just like, no, they're scheming. They don't have to scheme, but they're scheming. And even if we're all scheming, they're like, they're out about it, and that just kind of throws everybody into a little bit of a loop. And I think I actually was watching it, and I was like, oh, I guess I didn't realize Abby went home this early. And I was like, oh yeah, because it was John. So for me, even like reliving it, I was like, yeah, that was a switch up. And I even got called on it by Colin and Leah. They were like, oh yeah, well, she said Abby, and then she said John, and then she said, and I actually don't remember me being wishy-washy like that, but it makes sense because even now I didn't remember who I actually got voted out. So I have to re-examine those group me chats and figure out what that was. But
Yeah, so that was actually really interesting because like Ray is telling Hannah that he's telling her that he doesn't really trust Bun, that Bun's gonna flip if that's a tribe swap or if they switch it up. So I felt like Hannah was kind of telling Ray, let us throw the challenge, let us get rid of Bun, and we could just stay strong that way.
That was something like that was a huge thing for me. Is I said it in the episode, and I'll say it again now. Like their loss, and it did have some. There was some interesting. There was so many dynamics about this tribe swap, and you wouldn't think about it. You wouldn't think it because it started off so like really everybody's like there's no change, and the real change was Mystery Gang getting split. But that did so many interesting things number wise because the crazy, I think it was 7, I guess at this point, which was more than we had in our first tribe. So we're already like at a bigger tribe, and it just feels like there was Shaggy's first instinct was, oh, like it's 3 and 4. But what ended up being Blue Crew had the numbers, but they, were not very good at keeping that connection with Colin, to say the least. Like they made him feel like an outsider from day one. And so that kind of was their downfall. And of course, I was like, I hope this is sincere. And I think from Colin Bunn's point of view, like it was a good move to go with us, because I at least I felt really good about Pinkie Pact when it started, and I think, you know, something, who knows what'll happen in the future, but from at this episode, the Pinkie Pact started out of Colin, feeling like an outsider. And then that was the other divide, is the freshmen and the upperclassmen. And so I think we had those little bonds, and at this point when everything gets topsy-turvied, you're grasping for any common ground you can. And so
Yeah, because I think it's quite interesting that the freshmen and then all the upperclassmen, I feel like those type of common grasp will definitely come into play eventually when you're on the bottom and stuff like that, or you're looking to flip or something, or need to get somebody out. Like, it's just an easy excuse to use to say, hey, come and work with me. You know.
mm-hmm.
So let's get into the results of this tribe swap that we had, which I low-key, I thought Trevor's spoiler on the episode was going to be in result of this tribe swap and how hardly anybody changed tribes, really. And it was pretty much just Mystery Gang, just with a different colored buff. with Kristen, Nick, Addie, and Sophie. They all of Tolly Bismolly is on the new Michigan with Abby Ray and the one Blue Crew member, Henry. And then you have new Piptali Bismolly. You have 4 Blue Crew members with Hannah, Gabe, Maggie, and Bun. And then you have 3 of Mystery Gang between you, Shaggy, and Leah, which I thought was quite interesting. That like it wasn't like a huge flip where you have like maybe like 3, 2, and 2, or like or something like that, which I thought was quite interesting.
I think, dynamics aside, a bonus surprise for me was that of all of the going from 3 to 2, that of all the tribes he was gonna drop, he dropped Blue Crew and kept Tolly. I was shocked most about that, because he was always throwing fits about, oh, I can't wait till don't have to say this name, it's such a mouthful. And then when I got on Peptali Bismolly, he was like, oh, great. I would go to the 7-Eleven and pass it in the aisle and be like, well, So I think we hinted at this episode, we were feeling like Peptali Bismolly like just had a negative history. It wasn't the juju we were looking for. So I think that was kind of a funny turn of events on that note, just in the dreaded pink.
Yeah, Samir, do you have any thoughts, or?
Henry looked a little too comfortable tonight in this episode, and to me that's a little concerning. And Sophie's gonna have some work to do here. Her biggest ally just got sent home, so I think she's gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate, maybe, to work her way back into this tribe and hopefully avoid getting voted out in this next episode.
That's to be fair. So let's hop into this challenge here. So it's pretty much a version of One World, where pretty much they hold up a blanket and they cover it, and you have a certain amount of time before the first person says to stop, and then you have to go back and you have to run across the entire lecture hall and try to memorize it. And you guys had to memorize a Roblox cube, a cone, a water bottle, a hat, a domino, a marker, and scissors. At some point or another. At some point it was 5, 6, or 7 items at a time. Which I thought the challenge, everyone just went, stop! Like after like 5 seconds.
Well, millisecond. And that was a whole nother thing where, not just, we'll still talk about the challenge, but just, I can already like watching, since I wasn't there when the new Mystery Gang, I was like, oh, that's Mystery Gang. I'm Mystery Gang now. So the new Mystery Gang, they talked after the challenge, and I think it was just such an interesting, like, if you're not in the room where it happens, it's just an easy way to get your name thrown around. And it didn't help that he was so cocky during that. It was annoying to watch, let alone be on the team that I won't go as far to say that they lost because of it, because he did get 2 points, and I think that's what ended up saving him. But it was noticeable because it's that kind of, you want to feel like a team, and it just felt kind of careless, and I don't know. So that was more of a how it came off socially, but it was interesting game strategy.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because you have like Leah losing to Henry twice, and she's making this excuse of her having a concussion, unfortunately, from soccer, which I'm like, oh my god, that's
I didn't
crazy.
see that coming, honestly. I was a little shocked with that, but I mean, it is what it is. It happens.
Yeah, I was like, what? And so, and pretty much, and then there's Sophie's name getting thrown around. There's Addie's name getting thrown around a lot because Pep Charlie wanted them gone, and they kind of had the numbers, and so Ray, Henry were kind of thinking, let's just go with them and see how it goes. And it's kind of crazy because I was thinking, just vote for the 3 on the bottom, one of the 3 on the bottom, right? I mean, it's give out for Henry, Ray, or Abby because they're not in your numbers. I mean, you rather just stick to the people that because overall it is a numbers game, and the people that you trust the most, you want to stay with them as long as you possibly can. And I was shocked that Nick was pulling. Nick is playing hard this season.
It's been interesting to watch because when he's in person, he's oh, I run a podcast, and he's so like just mild mannered, and to be fair, like even off camera when he's just doing the one-on-one confessionals, he still is a sweetheart, and I can tell that a lot of these decisions do weigh on him. And it's funny now, my current boyfriend is in the same frat as him, and so I've gotten to like know him through that. But it was interesting to be like, the Nick I played with, it's interesting to see how the game changes certain parts of him. I think he definitely it was interesting to see him get more comfortable in the game. And it definitely, I think, took it was always happening inside, but slowly I think it got to be shown to everyone else, but it was very subtle, and so that was interesting to see that contrast.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see, like, he picked Kristen up at first, and then he went off to Ray, and then he went off to Sophie, or I mean Henry, because Abby and Sophie, they were a pair, and they were never going to really vote for each other. It's crazy how that pair dynamic duo kind of developed throughout these episodes recently.
Mm-hmm.
Which I can definitely see the reasoning between them two standing together. I think because they're both like each other.
Yeah, I was like, even now I still get kind of confused about which one was on my team and which one, like, because I think I played. They are so similar, and just even in the way they hold themselves and the activities they do. And so that was definitely a connection that once somebody said, oh, they're in the same sorority, I'm like, oh, that'll be.
Yeah. And so we get this whole Hannah and Colin Ray meet together.
They have their own talk, like they kind of already do. Like this whole, like, the couch with Hannah and Colin. And it's just, again, another person that you wouldn't necessarily know from the player's perspective, like having been on like many group chats like within the game with Colin. He has this very like, yeah, mm-hmm. And that worked because several times in hearing other people vibes, general reactions, they're like, oh yeah, he's cool. And it works great because it's not threatening. But then when it's the Hannah and Colin Ray talk show, he is a diva. was just like, she talks over me, I'm not having it. Like, nobody talks over me. And I was like, whoa, like, the tea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's crazy how I think Hannah wears the pants in this relationship, and kind of tells Colin, because Colin's been the one going to tribal and she hasn't really gone to tribal, and she's kind of been planting some seeds into Colin, like, yo, you might want to get rid of this person, or maybe like you might want to tell Shaggy this name, or
I found out about their relationship. I don't think at this point in the season I had found out yet. But at some point, and I think I'll probably say something on this. Like, I remember when I found out, I went right to confession. I said, I found something out. That'll probably make its way into it. But on Facebook, of all places, because you get, I don't know, maybe I had one person, like, I friended Shaggy, and then it gave me recommendations based off of that. And I was like, oh, and I don't know if it was, I don't want to say that it was they had a profile pic together, like their Facebook profile pictures were of them together. Maybe at least there was a prominently featured picture, and I clicked on it, and I was like, that was 2 years ago. Like, that is interesting. And so I think, again, this is maybe from my perspective, we were smooth about it, but maybe we weren't. We were like, oh, they want to keep a secret? We can keep a secret too. Like, we are going to pretend that we don't, and see how catch them in their lies. And that became a whole thing. But I think listening to them rationalize it has been interesting, because at the time, I give them credit that they kept it up as long as they did. And it's interesting, to see how hard they had to work to hide it, and how hard all of us kind of had to work to hide these things. Samir, I don't know if from your experiences on the show, it's kind of this, it happened at the beginning of this episode where Colin and Leo were having a talk in the DSU when John was getting a package, and it's just kind of like, and that's what may be interesting. I want to hear your experience, because this was pre-COVID. And so there was kind of this idea of being out and getting meals with somebody, and people are walking around and there's traffic. So just being seen with somebody could have been like conspiracy, or at least cause for concern. So who knows how a COVID session could have changed that, because it was much more reliant on much more private communications.
Right. Yeah. You can start to see that paranoia step in between Colin Ray and Hannah. And I don't know, is it going to explode? Is it going to stay? But she's like, we can't be seen together. We got to go our separate ways. And, this is starting to get a little interesting here, because in the event next time they get seen, there's going to be some questions being asked, and this game could really turn on its head, especially with those two.
Yeah, because like Leah even questioned Colin Ray in tonight's episode, that Colin Ray was telling Leah about Hannah, and Leah's starting to get sketchy of her being schemy, and just like, I might want to keep an eye on her.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite interesting. I was thinking, maybe you should use that to advantage. Maybe you should tell Shaggy and Lily about this, and maybe it could be a future target moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Colin Ray's going to have some thinking to do. And it better be some good thinking. Otherwise, his game might be over right around the corner. You never know. That's Survivor for you there.
It was certainly a precarious position, and it was interesting to see how relieved Hannah was that they weren't on the same team. It's also funny, side note, that Shaggy and I are both theater majors. And so when I was first getting introduced in the first episode, Shaggy's introduction was right before mine, and it said theater. And then I went right after, and I was like, dancer. And I'm like, I'm a theater person too, but I get it, for whatever reasons, I was the dancer. But that bond of theater was something that Shaggy and I really shared. And so just watching Hannah and Colin Ray, I gotta pay more attention to what they actually do I don't even know what they're studying, but they're like, I'm such a good actor. Like, oh, I didn't even look at you today. And I was like, okay. I mean, there's a certain extent of the melodrama, seeing them kind of work out. It's exciting from an outside perspective, but then I'm suddenly remembering how terrifying it was from an inside perspective. Because there's a certain subtlety almost of I think Hannah has mastered the kind of cool demeanor, and it's very, and I didn't really see the moments like her finding the idol. That was the most expression I think I've ever seen from her face, and she earned it, and I was happy for her. But I was like, the wheels are definitely turning, and I think that's something that everybody on the team, you're like, oh, their wheels are turning. That's just the threat, but hers were turning. But she did a really good job at covering it. So
yeah, I would always say the one thing about Hannah is that she has her poker face on lockdown. Like she can hide her expressions really well, even with like her tone of voice. Even like
I will say the one thing she didn't hide, and it was only confirmed by what she said right to Colin was, yeah, low key, I don't like anyone on my tribe. It's like, yeah, well, you didn't hide that well, and I think that's another thing that caused tension in the moment and later down the line, where it's just this feeling of, like, I'm not going to even make the effort to try to get to know you. Like, I'm just, it immediately, that was the impression I got and a lot of other people got. And so I think that how that is going to impact her relations with people down the line by not making that first, even because I think there's something to be said about introverts. Like, Kristen's another kind of quieter one, doesn't often start the conversation. But it's just, sometimes just happens to be there when it happens, and that works out for some people. But there's something to be said about, like, the first episode, I texted Shaggy immediately, and because we're like best friends right now, he said something before he had known me. He was like, oh, she's a threat, and like we should get her out. And I was like, what? I had no clue that there was that initial mistrust. This whole friendship's a lie now, but we're fine. But it's just this idea of kind of initial impressions, and that I think what I did that changed Shaggy's mind and made us like super ride or die, as I said many times, is we had a personal talk about life and outside the game. And not only as a freshman new to campus, it was really great to have such a strong friend in the game, but also in person. I think that is a general Survivor kind of debate on being personal with people, and does vulnerability bring you closer or make it easier for people to backstab you? So that's something that's always kind of been my weakness, but also something that I wouldn't change because that's who I am. And I think it shows, and it's interesting to hear people comment on that, like how it comes off.
Now, Hannah's attitude, should that be a red flag for Colin, maybe? Like that little, maybe it's time to break up the band type of deal? Or you think he doesn't really see that coming?
I think that they still do have a very strong relationship. And I think when I found out on Facebook that they'd been together for 2 or 3 years prior to this, they were dating in high school. So I think that convinced me that their roots were strong, and that for whatever reason, they've stayed together for 2 years. They know each other as people. And I'm sure, Hannah's competitiveness, that's nothing new. And I think they know each other well enough to be able to divide things. And I was actually very impressed at the kind of scary maturity to which they laid down the terms of, this is my idol, I earned it, and, it is mine. And that was kind of, all right, it seemed a little rough, but they kind of were able to be separated. And I think that's something that definitely impressed me, seeing behind the scenes, because I didn't know how it worked at the time, but seeing them kind of rationalize it was interesting. And if it works for the relationship, it seems like that maybe it wasn't too much of a surprise that she acted that way, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because I would say it's crazy, how sometimes relationships inside the game and relationships outside the game are completely different, and how they factor between the two. But I wonder, are we gonna we might have some broken pinkies later on in the season, I think.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, as much as the alliteration of Pinky Pact, like a thumb might have been a little bit stronger limb to, or even just like a good old headlock. it's an interesting. This I think it. Not to get all deep and metaphorical, but the idea of a pinky promise, it just sounds kind of childish, like, oh, pinky promise. But I think at the time, young, optimistic freshmen in our eyes, that's kind of what we were banking on, is like, I said it point blank. I said, if we stay together, we can, like, boom, 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 get the three of them out. And it's just this, like, if nobody messes this up, we can do it. And it's just this, you have to, it's a four-way promise. Like, one person makes one different decision and everybody's screwed. So there's that kind of precarious trust that I think maybe the pinky metaphor might be suiting, fitting for. So that was
It's Pinky's promise is strong until you get that crossies don't count phrase in.
yeah.
All right, so let's get to tribal. And Addy is feeling like there's very little connections that he's making, and that Sophie is kind of like the most logical thing is like stick to the numbers. We just put somebody out, not that big of a deal. We have Henry saying he hasn't really made that many connections. We'll just see how it falls, which is crazy to think because he's the one person who's completely on the outs. At least, or Mystery Gang, Ray has somebody in Abby, at least. I mean,
And Samir, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, like, he just doesn't seem to have a care in the world. He just felt so comfortable. And you're watching it now, 2 years later, I'm like, yeah, no, it's not just me. It just is very, a part of me, it's like, that's just his personality. He's class president and he's like, oh, haha. It's kind of a charisma that is very threatening, but also it's annoying to work with. It's annoying in the games. And I think that him specifically, he was like, oh yeah, I'm getting all these DMs, but I'm gonna leave and I'm not gonna text them back. I'm gonna leave them hanging, like thinking he's hot shit. Like, everybody wants to talk to me. And I don't know, it just didn't feel, it irks me.
That poker face, he's trying to put it on, but right now, his tribe is starting to plan, I think, pretty soon. If he keeps putting that poker face on, they're going to see right through it, and that's going to lead to his demise. So
this is such a crucial part in the game when Hannah kind of started to bring it up, saying she was already saying, like, oh, she said something about Shaggy, like that if somehow we were to work together, I don't think I could beat him. And that's how, and then Colin was like, no, we don't have to worry about that yet. And I was like, to an extent, yes, but also, that was definitely a tip off. Again, I'm only seeing this now, but it makes sense that that's what she was thinking already at the time. In fact, she's probably been thinking about that since day one, like just what a smart player she is. And I think this idea of agenda when it comes, and Mystery Gang at our first tribal, we went through the same thing about John is a threat long term, but Abby, no, wait, Abby, who did we vote out? Oh my god.
You guys voted John the third episode, so
yeah, so we blindsided him. See, I'm telling you, I still don't remember who we voted out of so but yeah, so we did end up voting out John, but it was kind of, we were saying he could help us with, it's the benefit of the team. You want strong players, and I think Henry is definitely a blonde, blue-eyed athlete, and it's kind of like, yeah, I feel like he's definitely going to help in competition, even if he's a little annoying about it. But it's kind of, you don't want to be the one to mention a game move, because then, again, plotty, but it's this idea of kind of avoiding, there's this one strategy of avoiding tribal councils by winning, and that's kind of optimistic, but hey, if it works, it works. But there's also, you gotta start getting targets out. So it's,
yeah, because that's the same flip of the coin. It's like you want people to keep your tribe strong, but you need to get them out before
before
a merge, and they start winning individual immunity, and if you can't get rid of them, they can go very deep into the game, which is kind of that decision that you have to make. It's quite interesting about that. So tonight we had a weird split vote tonight. We had Abby unfortunately go home, which by Petali Pasmali and Ray, which surprisingly Sophie did not get told about Abby because them two were close, and I think and Sophie is now thinking, oh, from like the clip at the end of the episode was like, oh, I voted against my tribe. What are they gonna do? Do they still trust me? And we have 2 votes, and then Henry voting for Sophie. So their tribes are clearly on 3 separate sides.
Well, Henry, maybe if you answered just one of those DMs, you would have, I mean, I'm not sure how the math worked out from their perspective, because I was surprised watching it that it was split in 3 ways. Like, just that shows there's a lack of communication, and I'm curious, and it'll be interesting to watch their thought process in the next episode of narrowing down. I guess, was it that obvious that Henry was the stray vote? Because I guess if he didn't talk to them, they didn't talk to him, and it was just, I don't know. We'll see how the repercussions for this stray. There just feels like a lot of fragments. So we'll see how that ties up together.
Yeah, because you would have thought that Henry would have been the lone vote anyways, because he's along with Blue Crew. I mean, he's the one with the numbers, and it's interesting that Ray vote with the rest of Petali Bismali and not Sophie, which is crazy because Sophie was on their original tribe originally, and she didn't know about it. So it's kind of mind-boggling to me.
And it does make sense why she didn't know about it, and to the extent of I get why they didn't tell me. There's still reason to. It's not. You can't stop worrying there. Like, okay, they didn't tell me because she's a friend of mine, but they also just voted out your friend, and so it's kind of, am I next on the hit list? It's, when does it start? When does it end? And it's the truth and the lies, and if you're part of the conversation or you're being fed alternative truth about the conversation, and that's where the paranoia starts.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see next week to see what happens next on CNU Survivor. Tune in next Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern Time for the next episode, and we'll be back. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and tune in next week, Tuesday at 9 o'clock for the after show for episode 5 of season 2. Gonna be crazy. We'll see what happens. Peace out.